Welcome. Today, FMC, former members of Congress, and women in international relations are thrilled to present to you Cultivating Careers, featuring Ingrid, Majda, moderated by Professor Greenhill. And this event will be recorded, so please keep that in mind. And I'll give a brief background on FMC and then pass it on to Sejal to talk about women in international relations at Tufts. So FMC works bipartisan, works across the aisle to foster cooperation between former members and current members in advancing civic education and also diplomatic cooperation. And we've had the good fortune to work with our partners, as you can see today. Sejal, do you want to talk about women in IR?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm the co-president of Women in IR, a club at Tufts that brings together women studying IR to connect with one another, discuss foreign issues, and facilitate discussions like this one about the future of women in the field. The club was actually founded by Haruka, the representative of FMC tonight, and we're so lucky to have her here today.
I'm now going to turn this over to Professor Greenhill to introduce herself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm delighted to be here and to moderate what promises to be a terrific panel. My name is Professor Kelly Greenhill. I'm a political scientist with a specialization in international relations and security studies. I hold faculty appointments at Tufts University and at MIT, where I also currently direct the International Relations Program. I also direct a program in Washington for MIT, the Seminar 21 program. And outside of academia, I've worked as a defense program analyst for the Department of Defense, and I do consulting for a wide range of governments and international organizations, UNHCR, NATO, World Bank, things like that. And over to our terrific panelists, I think we should start with Ms. Ingrid Ask. Over to you.
Lovely. Thanks so much to all of you, to Haruka and to Kelly. It's lovely to meet you on the screen, Majda as well. And it's a wonderful opportunity for me to be here and to talk to you, at least virtually. We have all become pros on digital socializing. So this is great. I really appreciate it. Well, just a few brief words to introduce myself. So my name is Ingrid Ask, and I'm the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of Sweden in the United States, located here in DC. And in practice, this means that I am the Deputy Ambassador, and I step in for the Ambassador in all her different duties, both external engagements and internal affairs, and all our interactions with US counterparts, administration, others in the country. So our job is really to promote Swedish interests in the United States, but also to explain the United States and the US actions and priorities to the Swedish government. So we have this dual function, you can say. And of course, it also means to take care of the embassy as a workplace. It's for Swedish standards, a big embassy of 50 plus people. And this is also an important task, of course, for us. So just a few words about my background. So I'm a political scientist. I studied political science and languages, French and Spanish, in Stockholm and Uppsala universities in Sweden. Short while I was also studying in France in the 90s. Well, my dream was really to be a translator of French novels or something like that, but I also enjoyed political science and social sciences, and nothing that I really planned, but I was accepted to the Swedish Foreign Service in 1999. And since then, I have worked for the government. I have worked with in Stockholm with the Africa Department, the Foreign Minister's Office, the Department for Consular Affairs and Civil Law. And I have been posted to the Swedish Embassy in Pretoria, South Africa, for 4 years, and also here in Washington, actually, for 5 years between 2005 and 2010. So it's my second time here in Washington, D.C. Between my two postings in Washington, I was also for a while seconded to the Swedish Armed Forces. So I worked as the foreign policy advisor to our Chief of Defense, what we call the Supreme Commander. And then I came back and came here to Washington. And just finally, I really look forward to sharing reflections on career choices but also work-life balance, things like that. I'm sure mind also. And of course, inevitably, the fact that I'm a woman in a profession that at least previously was very much dominated by men, not anymore, actually, at least not in Sweden. But that, of course, has also shaped my experience and my journey in the Foreign Service. And well, this is Women's History Month, and I represent a country with a feminist government and also a feminist foreign policy, and with a strong emphasis on gender equality. And of course, this is also something that has shaped my career, and also in very practical ways. And I'm happy to talk more about that. But I think I'll end there, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. Majda Morad, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to FMC for having the foresight to host such a great conversation, and Sabine and everybody at FMC that make it happen. Thank you, Professor, for all you do. And it's amazing, you know, you say MIT and this and that, and you make it seem so easy, but it's just amazing what you do. And Ingrid, it's a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to having a conversation. By way of background, my name is Majda Morad. I came to Washington, D.C. by accident. I met a guy named Sonny Bono in Palm Springs, California, and he asked me to come work for him. I didn't realize he meant Washington, D.C. And I said yes, and I came here for $18,000 a year as a staff assistant. And I just worked and worked and worked. And unfortunately, he was in a skiing accident and lost his life. And his wife, Mary Bono, wanted to take his position and run for his seat and asked me to stay on. And I said, absolutely. And then after getting her reelected into 3 elections in 1 year, I met a senator from Michigan named Spence Abraham, who happened to be Lebanese as well as I am. As background, Lebanese American. We were both born and raised here for many generations, but so we got along, and he asked me to come work for him. He lost his reelect, so we didn't know what we were going to do. And then George W. Bush was kind enough to offer him to be Secretary of Energy. So I had the privilege of heading up, being senior advisor for international affairs. So I always joke that I handled everywhere in the world but the United States. And it was kind of funny when I finally did leave and I realized it's harder to get to Des Moines, Iowa than Dubai. I realized the difference between domestic and international. When I left government in 2005, Spence Abraham and I started the Abraham Group. Our very first client was Cheniere Energy, a company that was trying to import natural gas. And the founder of Cheniere, Sharif Suki, asked us to help him. And so we traveled around the world trying to purchase gas. And then we quickly realized that we don't need to purchase, that this is a shale revolution occurring in our own backyard. And our chairman had the foresight to say, let's go find out what this is. And so we were able to obtain the very first permit ever granted in the lower 48 in the United States of America. So it was a transitional moment for our entire country. And then we actually did get the third one as well. I don't think they wanted to give us 1 and 2, so they let somebody else go in between. And then I left Cheniere and we started Tellurian, a natural gas company that does the same thing. And, you know, it's been an amazing journey and I'm so grateful, but it's kind of funny to hear, you know, I'm excited to have the conversation because I never thought I would be doing what I'm doing. I didn't study political science. I didn't think, if you would have asked me when I was 25, are you going to be an energy specialist? I would have laughed so hard at you. So it's amazing how you end up just exactly where you're supposed to be and what's meant to be. And then Ingrid, you mentioned trying to juggle things. And, you know, at 23, you would have said, what's your dream? It's like to have 12 kids and live in a white picket fence. I mean, isn't that what every woman wants? So it's, well, I did. But, you know, so it's like, it's interesting to try and balance it all. So I look forward to the conversation. And again, you know, thank you guys for starting this organization and doing such great work. And I look forward to the conversation and the dialogue.
Terrific. Thank you very much. So I have a series of questions that have been submitted by our terrific hosts, but I want to take this opportunity just to note, I'm not going to say anything about my own journey, but I have not ended up where I thought I was going to end up either. So I think it's worth keeping in mind. We start off on a journey, we quite often end up somewhere else. It could still be a fantastic journey. You know, there are all sorts of ways to get to a very productive and edifying career. So with that as jumping off point, first question for both of you, would you please share with us something you wish you had done? This is maybe not the worst question to start with, given where we've come from. Something you wish you had done or had done more of during your time in college or early in your professional life. Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to. You know, it's interesting to me. I am a little bit unique in the sense that family is everything, and family is first and foremost. So I wish I would have been able to start a family early on. That wasn't something that happened, and it's kind of an awkward conversation to have, but I'm being real. And that's what you have to think about, is the realities, you know. So I wish I would have made more time for that and made it a focus. You don't realize it when you're younger that could not be an option in your life.
Time flies by and you think you have infinite time, and yet no.
Right. So it's an awkward answer, but it's an honest one.
That's what we're here for. Ingrid?
Yeah, no, this is an interesting question. And I think maybe my experience is a little bit different than many of the Americans participating here, because, well, you know, we have our university system. Well, higher education is free for all, meaning that we don't have the same kind of pressure. When I look at young people here today, you know, they start visiting colleges when they are 16, and they, you know, for years they think about what to do. And it was much less dramatic in my case, and it's also much more common in Sweden to take a gap year. And of course, I was a bit stressed, but I think I had the opportunity and the possibility to take it easy, and I'm actually glad I did that. And that's probably my advice. That would be my advice both to younger self and to others, not to stress out. I mean, both of you, Kelly and Majida, and also myself, I think we all share the experience that we ended up not necessarily exactly where we thought we were going, to a place we were going to, and you don't know exactly what your interests in life will be when you're 17, 18, or 19. How could you? So I think you should take the opportunity to travel. You should learn languages. I will come back to that. And work a little. I think by experiencing a little bit more of life itself, you will also be a more accomplished person. And I'm glad that I did that quite a lot. I could have done it maybe more. I think you should be guided by your interests and your passions, which I was. On a very personal note, I wish I would have studied law a little bit more because I understand today that it would have given me tools that are very useful in my profession.
Not too late, Ingrid.
Yes, no, honestly, I'm very happy about political science, but if I would have done anything differently, I would have taken more class. I would have studied law, actually, yeah. But that is true for me, not necessarily for everybody else. But I guess that what I want to say is that maybe sometimes you can also think of something, what kind of tools it gives you, not to be too focused on exactly the kind of work that is associated this or that academic topic or so forth, but what kind of tools it will bring you, and then you will see. This was, I guess, a fairly confused answer, but I hope it summarizes a little bit what I want to convey.
I think you covered a tremendous amount of terrain and gave folks a lot to think about, and I would endorse everything both of you said. In a slightly different angle that I think builds on the first question, what have been some of the biggest challenges you've faced in your career, and how have you navigated, if not overcome them?
I can start on that one, and it actually is closely linked to my previous answer, because in my case, I think my challenge has been to strike a balance between, I mean, in my profession, you constantly make choices. You apply for positions abroad. It's one employer, but it's actually so many different jobs. I mean, being a diplomat, you can be a trade promoter, you can work on environment or women's issues, or small embassies, big embassies, abroad, at home, and so forth. And how to strike a balance between what would be perceived as strategic choices for your career versus choices based on your interest. That is not always very easy. I think I strongly believe in the latter. Based on your interest. And I can give you also a personal example. When I was a very fresh and new diplomat, everybody wanted to work on European security issues. They wanted to go to Brussels, work on EU issues, everybody in my group. So I wasn't that convinced of that. So I was recruited by the Africa department. I worked on West African issues. That was probably not very high on the sort of popularity list. It proved to be a very good choice. If you make a good job, I got super interesting positions after that. And it was really a choice based on my interest and not what was perceived strategically wise for your future career. But that balance has not always been easy. I think that has been a challenge, actually. And you have to be founded in your own personal interest. Know yourself quite well to do that.
I would say, I often tell my students that they should do what moves them, because they're going to be much better at it and they will shine. And even if people don't think they are the strategic choices, they turn out to be the strategic choices, because they will thrive and impress people when they're doing what moves them in ways that might not be the case if they're doing what they think they should be doing based on other people's expectations. Majda, how about you? Big challenges that you faced in your career and how you've navigated them, overcome them?
In the political world, I feel as though the biggest challenge I've had to deal with is understanding the incredible depth in which people will take in order to be in the circle of relevance. And it was shocking. I'm like this girl from Ohio, Toledo, Ohio. I come to DC, and it's a big challenge to realize that if the Secretary of Energy says no, I don't want to meet with them, that they think it's your fault. So they will do everything to remove you in order to feel better about themselves, because it could never be the principal saying no to meet with me. It's got to be you. So if I remove you, then my problems are solved. And that's the DC mentality, and it is on the international level. Politics is a very different breed. Government affairs internationally, domestically, it is a new level. I think you do deal with different challenges when you have non-democracies, but it is something that is a challenge. And I have worked every effort to preserve myself, not to become a part of it. So every week on Thursday night, I fly to Toledo, Ohio, small little city, and I take care of my elderly dad who lives with me. And then I fly back on Monday and I do it all over again. But it's that time that I have with my family that gives me the strength to endure and deal with the mentality in the political world globally.
It sounds incredibly cathartic, and also truly well, invaluable, given the story you set in family. So what a wonderful thing. And another lesson for all of us in terms of keeping in mind what's important. And dovetails nicely with Ingrid's point about follow your interests, right? Remember what's important and what is going to be fulfilling to you. Question for you specifically, Ingrid. What advice would you give to graduating students looking to pursue an international career?
So, right, yes. Well, I will start and say language skills, really. If it's one advice, of course, you should follow your interest. But if you're unsure of what to do, study language. It's never wasted. And it will make your CV stand out, I think, if you compare to others. That's true. Well, Swedish is a very small language. We're 10 million people in Sweden, and few people outside Sweden speak Swedish. So we have to learn other languages, and several of them, preferably, actually. And I think you should spend lots of time in other countries, not just travel through, but spend time there. If you choose to make an internship abroad or work, take a job or language school or whatever you do, but stay there, spend time there, understand the culture and learn the language. It's never wasted. Apart from that, it's an interesting question, because I think it's true for Sweden, and I guess for many countries in the world, that of course you can, if you want to work on international relations, you can, you could imagine a career within the foreign service. But today there are so many big companies and medium-sized companies, and also other agencies and organizations that are active internationally. So I think the choice is really much broader. The choice you have to make, of course, then might be that would you like to work like I do? I still work for Sweden, a Swedish employer, but abroad, or it could be a Swedish company, or would you actually like to for a while and work for a foreign employer? Both has its advantages and disadvantages. But I think the opportunities are already there in a much broader way, perhaps, than they were when I was a student. You just have to find them. But the short answer is I'll stop where I began and say that languages, really, study languages.
So Majda, I think I'm tempted to ask you the same question, even though I wasn't tasked with doing so, given where you've ended up. But I'm going to tack that on to another question that was specifically targeted towards you, which is to tell us a bit about your experience working on the Hill. You've spoken about working in the hothouse environment and the cutthroat environment that is politics domestically, internationally. But tell us a bit more about working, on the Hill, and maybe what the differences have been across different members of Congress, and on the House side and on the Senate side. It's a lot embedded in there, but pick up and run with whatever makes sense to you.
Excellent. First, I just want to underscore what Ingrid said, because I agree with you. It's so important to go and see. I mean, I feel like the United States is so big that we tend not to go abroad, where every other country is so small, they tend to jump around countries, so they're so cultivated. And I can't express enough to go visit countries and ones that are harder than the United States. See how people live, I think that's invaluable advice, Ingrid. So I appreciate what you had to say. For me, working in international affairs, I think representing the United States government in that capacity really is something that teaches you how to really execute it. So I would really strongly encourage people who want to do international affairs for even a company or something, at least do an internship or do some kind of time watching the international affairs in the government. And it doesn't have to be at State Department. Every division, every agency has an international affairs. So DOE has international affairs, Commerce has international affairs. So there's so many different opportunities to do it a little bit, and to see how the formalities are before you jump into it. So little things about, you know, etiquette of giving a gift and what's protocol in a different culture, being mindful if you're going to have somebody from a very conservative country come to meet with you, to dress conservatively out of respect. So those types of things, you really learn a lot from people who've been doing it for decades. And those are what they call the career politicians in government. You learn everything from them because they really are the institution. DC is very bizarre in the sense that I feel like it's like a solid, clean cut in a cake. The Hill, the House side deals with the House side. The Senate deals with the Senate. The, you know, philanthropic community deals with them. And then you've got the diplomatic corps. And it seems very challenging to get them to all mix. But as far as working with members of Congress on the Hill, you know, you always have to remember you have an international perspective that you're going to talk to them about. And all they're thinking of is, how does that apply to the people who vote for me? So you have to cater to each and every member of Congress or senator that you want to make a point to. So if I'm going to speak with my congressman from, let's say, Pennsylvania, and they happen to have the Utica Marcella shell, okay, I need to find a way to make it important to them. You know what I mean? So I need to say, we need to ship the gas, you know, to Sweden. And I understand there's a large Swedish population in Pennsylvania. You know, find a way to tie it in to make it relevant for them. Otherwise, they won't give it the attention that and the merit that it deserves. And that's something to always consider when you're dealing with the Hill. It's a little bit easier in the Senate side because you have a whole state, you know, that you could talk about. But when you talk about some of these rural districts, it's interesting, you know, and they get criticized for everything. In America, it's amazing. If you go on what they call a congressional delegation, a CODEL, you're criticized back home. Why aren't you here taking care of us? So they have a hard balance, and it's a different mentality domestically. International affairs is domestically. So our politicians aren't as forgiven for what they do. So it's a different world. I hope that answered your question. It was like a lot of stuff.
It was a question from the audience, but there was a lot in there for them to chew on. So I think it's a great answer. Ingrid, you have a very knowing smile on your face. So even though this question wasn't directed at you, I would like to know what you're thinking. And this is your second tour in Washington, so please share.
I was smiling when Majida talked about, you know, what's important for the separate congressmen. Of course, we go a lot to the Hill, and yes. I was smiling because I think we always check who has an IKEA in his district or her district, because if they have an IKEA, Sweden indirectly is a big employer, you know, so it opens doors, you know. We have the fabulous publication of Swedish companies in separate regions, and you're right, Majida. You have to understand also why is Sweden important to them, you know? Why should they listen to me when I talk about Swedish trade or what we have to offer and so forth? So yeah, I did recognize a lot of what you said.
Well, and then that gets back to the concept of, do you worry about your reelection or do you worry about your legacy? That's the same concept. So, you know, Sweden may be important for the situation we're in today, which is a very topical conversation. It may not get you reelected to go to Sweden and find out how we can help, but it may be the right thing to do. And I think that's a tough position for people to be in. And I think that it would be great to open more American eyes to being aware of more of CNN International instead of CNN, you know,
Yeah.
how I think of it.
Indeed. Question for both of you. What recommendations might you offer to those who wish to pursue careers that might seem either out of reach, simply unusual, or your path less taken, or generally sort of poorly understood by friends, family?
I'll be happy to start. Don't worry about it. Don't listen. I never in my I didn't even know who my congressperson was when I went to work for Sunnyvale. No clue. I just always focus on setting yourself up for opportunity. And don't fight the direction that's meant for you to go in order to go where you want to go. And I think that's like the most important thing, because we could sit here and plan our careers. I think all three of us have recognized we didn't realize we'd end up where we're at. But it's okay if it changes, and it's okay to take.
Sometimes it's great if it does.
Right.
You realize, oh, the light went off. This is what I meant to do. I didn't realize it, but this is, yes.
Yes, and it's interesting how we tend to try and say, where am I going to be in 5 years? What am I going to be doing? How do I get there? Now, it doesn't mean don't plan and don't try to make an effort. Do all those things, but be so open to being taken off track and going into different directions. I think, Ingrid, you went into the work for the Secretary of Defense, and then you came back to the Foreign Services. So, there's so many different things that you can do that kind of take you in the direction that you're supposed to be, whatever it is. So I don't put so much pressure on yourself on where you're supposed to be.
I totally agree. I think no areas should be considered out of reach, really. And you shouldn't let people tell you that this is not possible or this is out of your particular reach, because that also might be a trap that, they tell you this, whereas they would tell somebody else something different. And I would like to add, actually, especially for women, I mean, the women I've been coaching throughout my career, many of them have a tendency to underestimate their capabilities. Sometimes the men overestimate their capabilities, and that's also no good. But unfortunately, I've had the most, brilliant, extraordinary women that I've worked with that didn't think, honestly, that they could do this or that. And I always had to tell them that you should believe in yourself. That is true also in Sweden, which is a country, as I said, that emphasizes gender equality a lot, and where women have more opportunities than in many other countries. But I think we're not quite there yet. Just to inject a little bit of a different perspective on this question. One, I don't think any areas are out of reach. You should really go for it. Don't let anyone hold you back. But sometimes it's also good to have, how can I put it, a realistic view of what you are doing, what you are aiming for. And what I mean by that is that I think of my good friend who is an opera singer. She has a passion for opera. She doesn't regret it, I think, but she says sometimes that she wishes that somebody during her, opera school years would have told her how extremely few permanent positions there are for a female opera singer, and that they would have more classes in business management also, because, and she would have understood more of the economic uncertainties that are actually linked to an artistic career like that. I don't think it would have held her back, but she would have liked a realistic understanding of what she was choosing. So I'm not saying that it doesn't mean that you should not aim for the stars or go, but you should really try and understand what it means for you, and what sacrifices you will have to make, and what's in it for you.
Information is power, right? Knowledge.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great point.
Decisions. Relatedly, building off the last thing second to last thing you said, Ingrid, how have each of you cultivated, maintained, or fostered mentorships, if both as mentors and mentees? Are there best practices you can identify that young people might emulate in looking for mentors or being mentors themselves as they progress in their careers?
Well, I really think that you should always, during your career, and regardless of what position you have, you should never be afraid of asking for advice. I've always done that, both in sort of management positions and other positions. You should always try and get mentors, and cultivate that and continue to do that. You learn very much from other people, and to seek advice both generally about how you view your career and your profession, but also when it comes to smaller details. When sometimes you have a difficult situation in your workplace, how do I solve this? Well, I call people, people that I trust in my organization. So I have this. How do I solve this? What do you think? That's a kind of mentorship or coaching or whatever you wish to call it that I think is very useful. And I have also come to the conclusion that the bosses that I've had that I respect the most are those who have had a very humble attitude when it comes to this, and actually that have listened more than they have talked themselves, and listened to others, and have not seen it as a sign of weakness to ask others for advice. Of course, then you should be prepared to make your own judgment and take your own decisions, but have that, to keep that openness, I think is very important. Also tried to coach others and to help people when they come to me with the same kind of queries of choices and so forth. It's very rewarding because you also get new ideas for yourself when you do this. And never to stop doing it. I know, well, even the most senior positions, I think this is extremely important, because it can be very lonely at the top also. If you don't talk to others of sort of the what you're facing.
Arguably become even more important as one climbs the ladder for this.
Exactly. Yeah.
Majda, thoughts from you?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you, Ingrid, and it's so true. And this is, to me, probably one of the most important things we're talking about. I had no clue what I was doing when I came to Washington. So I would have to say it's similar to Ingrid, my bosses. There's been specifically 4 people in my life that have directed my entire personal and professional life, other than obviously one of them being my mother. And I just remember those people gave me words that got me through so much. And I appreciate it so much. And they always took the time. And whatever you do, I mean, if you're blessed enough to have somebody believe in you entirely that you get to work for, they will always stand next to you. And when you're in, I'm a little bit different in the sense of I'm in domestic politics as well, which makes it a fight. And they stand by you in a world that there is absolutely no loyalty. It's really important, and you're very privileged, and I've been privileged to do that. I work for a chairman that I have the utmost respect for, because he takes the time to say those things that I need to hear. When I'm really down, I've had a mentor look at me and say, Majda, remember, you don't ride with the ponies, only the stallions. In other words, don't get caught up in the weeds of Washington. And those things are what get you through. And I was just talking to my team today that I work with, Dave and Sophia, and I said to them, they're like, you're going to do what for who? My most important thing I do in a day is help somebody achieve what it is they want, or teach them a little bit. So I have an internship program at my office in DC. I pay my interns, and my interns don't make copies and answer phones. My interns do everything I do. And so that to me is how I take them under my wings and make them the best they can be. because, I never had that opportunity as a kid. So I do the best I can to bring anybody and everybody in and share as much as I can, and if they use it, great. But if they don't, at least I tried. So I like to give a lot of myself professionally because I'm so grateful for the opportunities I've had.
Thank you very much, both of you. So I have now some questions from the audience. The first of which, are there specific challenges that being a woman has imposed upon you along the way in your career path? And how have you overcome them? Or how did you overcome them? Or I guess I would add, or navigate them. Sometimes things can't be overcome, they should be worked around. Challenges specific challenges as a woman, and how do you confront them, combat them, or overcome them?
Yes, no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I have to say, are there challenges? Yes. Sometimes you work for a female and you've got to make sure you don't get any attention she doesn't get. So that's a little bit dicey in my world. But I say that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. I am so blessed to be the woman and be who I am, and I wouldn't want it any other way. And I actually use it to my advantage because I feel like I can care and show I can care. I got details, all those wonderful traits about being a woman that allow us to really be better at what we do. So I have to say, yes, there are challenges, you have to navigate and make sure you do the proper things. And you may have to dress a little more conservative if you're around a lot of males, especially when you do international with more conservative cultures. But it's also a very great advantage. Ingrid?
Yeah, no, I agree. I have never felt really that I've been held back because I'm a woman. But I, as I said initially, a lot of things have changed, I think, during my career. Because when I started in 1999, it was still very male dominated, especially on the senior levels world that I entered. And I think a good thing that has happened, at least in the Foreign Office, is that back then people would often land very senior positions based on their skills as negotiators in international negotiations or something like that. Whereas management skills, how you handle conflict in your office and things like that was perhaps not as decisive as it is now. Now I think that's valued much more, how you handle the workplace, how you take care of the work, how you inspire, your colleagues and so forth. And that is a good change. And we have also many more women now on senior positions. I think Sweden is, I don't know if it's the only embassy. I think it was only Sweden and South Africa that I knew of for a while that had both a female ambassador and a female deputy ambassador. That is very uncommon in Washington. Washington is considered a very sort of prestigious posting. But things can be changed, and I'd like to say to the students also that be agents of change, because it benefits also women but also men, actually. And one very concrete change that I've seen over the years has to do with parental leave. Actually, we have when I started, it still in Sweden, as is the case in many other countries, it was mostly the women that would take long parental leave when they had kids, whereas the men, they were off work for much shorter, and we have very generous rules in Sweden for paid parental leave. But what has happened is that my male colleagues take longer and longer parental leave, and now, the norm, I would say, is that also men, they go away for 7 or 8 months when they have a kid, first, so first a woman, take, first for maybe but mostly would take 7 or 8 months, and then their spouse would sort of do the same, meaning that if you're an employer, you don't discriminate women. I mean, if you employ a woman, recruit a woman to your unit who's between 25 and 40, she is about as likely as her male colleague to go away on parental leave. So she's not discriminated against when it comes to salary or career-wise and so forth. That benefits everybody. And I can even say that my male colleagues who would not take a longer parental leave, that's not something that is rewarded or looked well upon. That's considered a bit strange, Why don't you take time off with your kid like everybody else? So, I mean, it is a change, and it shows that, with also legislation and with, things can change, because that also changes norms on the workplace. And perhaps, the public sector is a bit ahead of the private sector, but you see it across the board in Sweden. And so that the specific challenges for women are at least different. So we don't see them as much now as we did perhaps before, which is of course a good change.
So there's a question that was inspired by your comment, Ingrid, about the opera singer. The question is, how does one find balance between career choices that might come with financial security, balancing those between paths that, where passion might not be accompanied by financial security? I think the question is, if you have to choose between passion and pay, which way do you go, and how do you balance those potential trade-offs?
You want to go, Machida?
Sure, I'll be happy to try that one first. That's a tough one, and the reason why it's tough is because I feel like when we're younger, passion is so much more valuable, and a perfect example is, I'll use my nephew. My nephew is a music engineer person. So he literally works in like recording of music industry. And he was adamant to be in this career that everybody wants to be in, that has no stability. And then I remember when he turned 35 and he had 2 kids and a wife, and he looked at me and he goes, I wish you would have told me to think more wisely. And I think that sums it up. It's like, are you one day going to look and say, I want some financial stability in my life? Probably. Does that mean don't take advantage of your passion? No. So, in the same token, I had a football player say to me, I'm like, well, your career's over by the time you're 35. Why don't you plan for it? He's like, Majida, do you really think I could run full throttle into another human being with all my force and possibly, have a concussion if I thought there was another option out there for me? So it's a hard balance, you got to think realistically. But in the same token, you don't know where you're meant to be, and you have to give it a try sometimes, and hopefully you'll learn quickly. But, I come from an upbringing where it was always go out there and survive. And as long as you're surviving, it's okay to be a little bit, into your passion and always have, mechanisms and thoughtfulness of, okay, if I'm 28 and I've gotten nowhere, let's rethink this kind of thing. So I think you have to be open to changing direction, but don't lose passion. Ingrid, what do you think? That's a hard one.
No, I agree. I mean, no matter the pay, if you're not interested in what you're doing, you're not going to enjoy it, even if you have a high salary. You have to be interested in it, right? I mean, I think all of us share that. You have to enjoy work, and you have to find it interesting. And I would definitely say, first of all, as a student, relax a little. find your passion, take your time to do that. You might find it in unexpected areas. Follow your interests and don't be too bothered or worried about your future career. But, and I guess this is where the opera singer friend of mine comes in, inform yourself, really, because you have to be realistic still, you know. You have to know what you have to sacrifice and what's important for you. Hopefully you will find both, you know. Hopefully you will be able to follow your interests and still, you know, pay your bills. That's what we all want to do, right? But inform yourself. Actually, I had once a boss who talked to me about the mix of idealism and realism, you know, how to mix those in a career. It was a very good talk, and how you have to have a little bit of both, really.
Well said.
So unless I'm much mistaken, I think we only have 1 more minute for questions. So a micro round. How do you maintain your self-confidence when going into a meeting or interacting with people, either a male-dominated field or just with a bunch of people who are far more senior than you are, have much more experience? Just how do you keep your presence and project strength when you don't necessarily feel strong?
Well, that is something that diplomats are experts on, because we know a little about many things. That's our job. We are supposed to be, you know, at least appear to be specialists on almost everything, or at least, you know, in a very short while to inform ourselves to the extent that we can, you know, promote Swedish interest in very various fields. But still, you have to be yourself, and ask questions. Don't try to appear more knowledgeable than you are. If you want to ask basic questions, do that. People are often very happy to talk about things in sort of in a basic way also, if it's not your field of expertise. So I guess it's a cliche, but I'd still say be yourself, you know. Don't pretend to be any other person. And actually there's one saying that I don't like very much, and that is the saying that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It might be true to a certain extent, but you know, what if you have a bad day? Sure, I think you very often get a second chance. You'll do better next time. Don't worry too much about it. So I don't think we should be too preoccupied with how we appear and what kind of impression we make. Be yourself and you know, listen also. Ask questions and listen to others.
Very sage advice. Majda, last word to you.
You know, I agree with Ingrid, but the one thing I do, and this still happens to me today, I walk into meetings that are all men. They're all older than me, although that doesn't happen as much anymore. I'm so sad.
Funny how that works.
Oh, and you feel so insecure. And what I tend to do is I go in there, I feel confident, I sit down confidently, and I say nothing unless I'm asked. And that puts you in the power seat, especially in a room full of men. And when you're asked, if you know the answer, say it. And like Ingrid said, if you don't, say, yeah, I'd be happy to get back to you on that. I'll look into that. But it's really a power move. And I if I'm insecure and I'm feeling that way, I always revert back to that.
Also very sage advice. So it just falls to me now to thank you both so very much for taking the time, for sharing your knowledge and experience, your insights, and for your candor. So much appreciated on all fronts. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And we wanted to say thank you from Women IR for both the panelists for their insight and Professor Greenhill for her excellent moderating. I know as a student, we tend to think about career in the future as a very theoretical thing, but hearing both of your perspectives on and your stories and on your careers has really illustrated what a career can look like in the future for me. And I'm going to take to heart what you both said about how it's okay for your path to not turn out how you imagined. If anyone would like to keep up with WIIR, our Instagram is Tufts_WIIR, and we will be doing an internship panel for anyone on campus next Monday at 8 p.m. in Olin, if you know the building. But again, thank you both for all of you guys for taking the time from your evening to talk to us today, and it's really been very insightful, and I'm very appreciative.
Thank you so much. What you guys are doing is amazing, and I commend you.
Yeah, thank you, and good luck, everyone.